Okay, team, today we are looking at AO10s, solving quadratic equations equal to 0. This is our third video on quadratic equations. Hopefully you've had a look at the previous two. Just to recap exactly what a quadratic is, it is any equation that involves a square or something to the power of 2. It's a quadratic equation, and the rest of it's reasonably self-explanatory. When we're solving, we're going to get an answer, or in this case, answers, but we'll explain that in a little bit more detail later. And obviously, the third part of this is equal to 0. So this skill we're going to learn here only applies when we're dealing with quadratics that are equal to 0. So you can see all the quadratics that we're dealing with here are equal to 0. Quadratics that are equal to 0 or can be made to equal 0. All right, so let's make a start on this, but just before we do, I want to make sure I truly emphasize this point here, hence the big red box. All right, and this point is anything multiplied by 0 equals 0. All right, so it's a fundamental part of our arithmetic knowledge. Anything multiplied by 0 equals 0. And that's a really, really important part for us to understand before we have a look at this lesson, because it's essential to understanding why we can solve these quadratics. So let's have a look at an example. Let's have a look at our first example. It's this question here. X plus 4, x minus 3 equals 0. Now the 0 here is really important. It tells us something important about our brackets. What it tells us that either this first bracket here or second bracket here equals 0. In order for the answer of this bracket multiplied by this bracket to equal 0, either this or that has to equal 0. So this gives us an easy way to identify what the value of x is, or what the value of x could be. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the first bracket here. Let's say x plus 4. Now, we're going to say this one here is the one that equals 0, just for example's sake. Okay, so x plus 4 equals 0. So if x plus 4 equals 0, what does the value of x have to be? Well, in this case, x would have to be minus 4, because minus 4 plus 4 equals 0. So a possible answer for x is minus 4. Well, what about if we're dealing with the second bracket? Well, in this case, it is x minus 3. We're saying this one equals 0 now. So what would x have to be in order for this bracket to equal 0? Well, x would have to be 3. But hold on, how can we possibly have two values for x? We can't, but we can't be any more specific in this circumstance as to what the value of x is. X is either 3 or minus 4. And that's better than nothing. It's better than having any number of unknowns. At least we've narrowed it down to 2. In this case, we can't be any more specific. So what we'd say in order to answer this question is x is 3 or minus 4. That's a totally legitimate answer for us here. All right, let's have a look at our next question. X minus 3, x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so let's treat this one here as 0 first. Well, in order for this equation to equal 0, x would have to equal 3, because 3 minus 3 equals 0. Let's have a look at this one over here. In order for this to equal 0, x would have to be 5, because 5 minus 5 is 0. So there's your answer. X equals 3 or 5. We can't be any more specific than that. But what do we do when we're looking at a question like this? What we're going to have to use here is we're going to have to use one of those skills that we learned in a previous tutorial. That's AO9's skills, factorize quadratics. So what I'm going to do with this guy here is I'm going to factorize this first. I'm going to put it back into its brackets. Now this is a skill we know how to do. It's from a previous tutorial. So we go 112, 2, 6, 3, 4 are the ways that we get 12. the one we're looking at is 2, 6. So if I factorize this, it's going to be 2 and 6. Positive. That still equals 0, which means x equals minus 2 or minus 6. There's our answer. So straightforward, we've just combined the knowledge from AO10 and from AO9. Last question I'm gonna show you before I leave you to do a couple on your own. What do we do in this case here? Well, this one's pretty easy. Let's just say x equals 5 over here. Well, what about this one here? Well, let's just treat it like an ordinary algebraic equation. Let's put it over here and we'll give ourselves a bit of working space. We're saying 2x plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so let's treat it just like we ordinarily would. Jackie Chan, let's try and get rid of this, which means I've got to try and get rid of that. You've got to balance it out over there, which means I'm left with 2x equals minus 6. And in order to get rid of that, I need to divide by 2, which means, in this case, x equals minus 3. So there we go, same problem, just like a slightly more complex step. We're just going back and we're dealing with basically one of the first AOs we learned as part of these tutorials. That's AO2, solving two-step linear equations. We've just made our own this time. We've said, okay, 2x plus 6 is 0. Let's find out what x is in this case. So there we go. That's the example of how we go through and do that. Remember, we're making sure we understand the concept that anything multiplied by 0 equals 0, and that helps us to solve these quadratics when they are equal to 0. So now's the chance for you to go through and attempt 2 of these questions on your own. Here they are. So now I want you to pause the video. I want you to try these questions. If you get stuck, go back, watch some parts of the video. Otherwise, give it a shot. Off you go. All right, how'd you go? Hopefully you found that not too much of a challenge. Let's have a go at the first one. So the first one is going to be x equals minus 4 or minus 5. That would make it. That would make both of those 0. That would make that equal to 0. That would make that equal to 0. So you get minus 4 or 5. All right. The second question, we have to factorize this first. So 40. How do I get 40? I'm going to go 1, 40, 2, 24, 10. What else have I got? 5, 8. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, what have I got in terms of my operations? I've got a minus 40, which means one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. The b value is positive, which means the bigger one's going to be positive, and the smaller one's going to be negative, which means these are my guys right here, positive 8 minus 5. Okay, so x minus 5, x plus 8, which means x, or that's equal to 0, x equals either 5 or minus 8. There we go. So hopefully you're okay with that skill. If you found that a little challenging, or you found if you made a mistake in one or both of the questions, feel free to go back, rewatch the video, check out some of the tutorials online, ask some questions of your classmates, or ask some questions of me. But hopefully you were able to understand that. So that was AO10, solving quadratics equal to 0. Well done again today, team. Fantastic. See you again soon. Bye for now.